Welcome back to the Bluechip Breakdown, Vols fans. Back again with some breaking news. I'm sure that by now everyone has heard about it. Nick Saban is officially out at Alabama. Now, this is something that my nephew Bray was telling me. He was hinting at it. He said, hey, I think that Saban's done after this season. I was like, nah, he's going to come back at least for one more year because he's going to have a much better team. He's got a better roster. Guys are getting older, etc., etc. But he went on ahead and hung it up. Now, number one thing that I want to talk about right here is why do I think Nick Saban decided to retire at this moment? We all know that they came just short of going back to the national championship again, and they probably would have won versus Washington. But I think that with the, temperature and nature of college football right now, with the transfer portal, I feel like especially guys can transfer as many times as they want to. Who wants to do that? I mean, college coaching was already, I think, one of the hardest jobs maybe on the face of the planet. It is a extremely demanding job. It's like all the time. You got to talk to all these different people. I mean, it's a lot. Obviously, you have to game plan. It is an extremely, extremely difficult job. But it's even harder now because how are you supposed to keep all these guys happy whenever they can transfer as many times as they want, whenever they want? So I think that was probably the biggest catalyst to Nick Saban deciding to hang it up. And I know as Vol fans, we're all very happy to see him go. Obviously, this is going to have a ripple effect on college football across the entire nation. The next thing that I'm sure most of y'all will want to talk about is who is going to come in and replace Nick Saban. And then we also need to talk about what does this mean specifically for our volunteers. Keep in mind that there's a lot of guys on Alabama's roster that probably would want to transfer out, especially depending on who the next head coach is. The only issue is those guys can't transfer within the SEC now because I believe that their window has closed to be able to jump into that transfer portal. But what guys are, already in that portal that were maybe kind of considering Alabama, who's going to back off, right? We talked about George McIntyre. Is it just us right now that it was down between us and Alabama? Now Nick Saban's gone. Is George McIntyre going to want to stay there? Maybe there's a coach that can come in and entice him to want to go play to Alabama even more than coming playing with us. So let's start off with the coaching search and what I've been hearing so far. All right, so the first guy for me, and I've been hearing this a lot from other people as well, would be Lane Kiffin. He was an offensive coordinator with Alabama, with Nick Saban. I believe that they won one, maybe two national championships. We all know that he's got a good offensive game plan and scheme. This one right here could be very scary just for us, right? So let's just talk about us right now at this moment. We know that we're trying to get George McIntyre. Would George McIntyre be more willing to go and play in an offense that's kind of similar to Tennessee's on a roster that is actually more talented than Tennessee's is right now, albeit he is the hometown kid? That's an interesting one to look out for. That's more of what I'm paying attention to, is how does this affect Tennessee? Now, obviously, there are several guys in the portal that Ole Miss just got. Is Lane Kiffin going to want to leave those guys, that he worked so hard to get in all the money that Ole Miss has spent, with guys that are expecting to play with Lane Kiffin? I think that he would. We know that he'll get up and leave you right in the middle of the daggum night. That's who Lane Kiffin is. I think that he wants to win a championship. Alabama will give him his best opportunity to. And, even with all the guys that Ole Miss just got in, Alabama still has a better roster. So would not be surprised if that job is offered to Lane that he would take it. That's going to be a very interesting one to watch for sure. All right, and the next guy is Kellen Dortch. That's the head coach for Washington. He's been a very good coach wherever he's been. Now, we can talk about Washington's roster just this past season. They were the lowest rated roster in the playoffs. For them to be there and then to make it to the national championship is pretty much nothing short of incredible. So he is losing a whole lot of talent this season up in Washington. Would he want to go ahead and make the move down to the SEC? Come on down here, play with the big dogs, and then you'll be able to have that offensive line, that front, everything really that you want. Okay, you would have that at Alabama. That's one, him and Kiffin, I would say, are the two guys that we really don't want Alabama to get, at least for me. But I would much rather Alabama go out and get Lane Kiffin than I would them get Kellen Dortch, because I think that he's a better overall coach, and that scares me a lot more than a guy who can go out and just stack up talent. Someone else that, has been mentioned pretty frequently is Dabo Swinney. Obviously, that's Clemson's head coach. I don't know if Alabama would do this. Now, I believe he is from Alabama. He's got some strong Alabama ties. But given the way that he's been coaching here lately and all the stuff about, I don't want to pay players and all this, let me tell y'all something, and y'all should know this if you've been following SEC football for some time now. Alabama has been about paying players. They want somebody in there that is going to cheat and not get caught. They've been doing that since football started. They pretty much started cheating, really. So a guy like that that's squeaky clean, I don't think that they're going to want him in there, just in all honesty. But, I mean, hey, crazier things have happened. Maybe he goes there. I would be ecstatic to see that happen, because once they, get somebody like that that's too up and up, all the cheating that they've been getting away with for decades, they won't be able to do it anymore. So Dabo Swinney, for me, as a Tennessee fan, he might be like number one up on my list for who I want Alabama to go out and hire. All right, and another guy is Mike Norville. That's Florida State's head coach. He's another really good coach, okay? He's coming from the ACC. We all know about what Florida State had to deal with this past season, not getting into the playoffs with an undefeated team. We know that ain't happening at Alabama. You're going to get in. If you're anywhere near being a pretty good team, or not, I shouldn't say pretty good, but if you are a good football team, they're going to try to push you in there, especially the SEC. They've got some sort of a Alabama favoritism going on, and they've had it like that for quite some time. But I think that he could maybe eye that job, right? Because he's lost a couple of players that have flipped on him to SEC schools. The ACC is kind of going to be, going away. We all know that most of those teams are trying to get out of there, just like Florida State. I think that for him, if he does get offered that job, it will make a whole lot of sense to go there. And I'm not too scared of him. Okay, he is a good coach, but I'm not, he ain't going to be no Nick Saban or nothing like that. I think that they would take a pretty big step backwards with Mike Norville, but keep a very close eye out for him as well. Someone else that I've seen pop up is James Franklin. That's the head coach at Penn State. I can tell you right now, he's probably not going to try to leave Penn State unless they maybe say something to him, at the start of the season or at some point in the season that, hey, you're starting to get on the hot seat, buddy. So if that's the case, then maybe he goes on ahead and leaves out, while he's got the opportunity to, instead of getting fired. Now, I don't think that Alabama would try to offer him the job, and he's a really good motivator. Okay, he's going to go out and identify talent. He's really good at that, but his offense, that scheme is just a little bit outdated. So I don't think that that's a guy that Alabama would want to try to hire. But if they do offer him the job, I'm pretty sure that he would want to stay in Penn State. He's from Pennsylvania. That was his dream coaching job. And I think that he probably wants to stay there until he's done coaching. Okay, now let's talk about Dan Lanning. That's the head coach at Oregon. I can see him going to Alabama and having a lot of success. He's a younger coach. Okay, so you get that young, fresh blood that we all know that these kids tend to kind of lean more towards these days. They want a coach that's a little bit younger and not, some of these older guys. And he's really, really good at drawing in players. We all know that he's not afraid to spend some money. And he just strikes me as the type of a guy that he ain't going to mess with the status quo. If Alabama's got something in place, okay, they just pretty much brief him on what that is. You keep this thing running and make sure that you're winning and you'll be fine. I think that they could be pretty successful with a coach like that. The only thing about him is he doesn't scare me as a coach, or, I guess looking at it from the Alabama perspective, from an X's and O's perspective, he's just not a guy that I feel like Tennessee fans should be scared of. They lost to Washington twice. That's hard to daggum do. To lose to the same team twice, okay, and in the same season.
That's hard to do twice.
That's not too good. So I don't know that Alabama would try to offer Dan Lanning, but if they do, I think that could be a pretty good match, for both parties. But they would have to try to get him someone in who can teach him how to play SEC football or how to coach to it. All right, and another name that I've heard thrown around here is Steve Sarkisian, okay? He's the head coach at Texas. If I was him, I would not want to leave Texas because you pretty much got the same thing at Texas as you do at Alabama. The only difference is Texas's roster is obviously not going to be as strong as Alabama's. But as far as the resources that you can get at Texas, and I also think it'll be a little bit more laid back than Alabama is. Alabama's going to be coming off of Nick Saban. They're used to winning. That fan base is spoiled. And I think that they are just waiting to blow up on somebody. So getting in a coach that's probably just going to be kind of mediocre, especially starting off. We saw him lose to a Washington team with a, far worse roster than what they have. He's just one of those coaches that he's going to lose one to two games every single season that he has no business losing. I don't know if he would take the job, and I don't really know if Alabama would offer him, but I do think that he would be one of the guys that they would try to interview early on, just being that he did get to coach up under Saban for such a long time. I think that would be a good transition for Alabama's program. But me as a Tennessee fan, I ain't scared of Steve Sarkisian by any means. Let him stay over there in Texas or go to Alabama. It don't matter to me. Y'all both in the SEC, and I fully expect that Coach Heupel will be able to out-coach Steve Sarkisian wherever he goes. All right, and the last guy that I'm going to throw into the hat is Coach Prime up at Colorado. Wouldn't that be hilarious if Jordan Seaton did all that flipping around and all this, making a big scene, goes up to Colorado just for Coach Prime to leave? Now, do I think that Alabama will offer Coach Prime? Absolutely not. I think that that's a very, very long shot. I just don't think that he fits, the image of what Alabama wants to present. So I just don't see that happening. But if they did, man, that would be scary, because I do think that Coach Prime, number one, we all know that he's going to be able to come in and get whatever player he wants in the entire country. Pretty much. He's going to be able to hand select whoever he wants. And, as far as from an X's and O's perspective, he will find the correct coaches that can come in there and that know football. Okay, he did a good job of that. I think at Colorado, I think he kind of pulled the trigger on firing some of those guys a little bit too soon. Obviously, that team's not very talented. But you go out and get a guy like Coach Prime, who we know can bring in top-tier talent just like Saban did, and, may not necessarily stick with that status quo of the way that they're cheating. But I do think that he will find some ways to kind of bend the rules just a little bit. I think that he could be a good coach at Alabama, and that would be a guy that I would be afraid of, for any other SEC team, but especially for us as Vol fans. We do not want to see Coach Prime come anywhere near the SEC. All right, so I'm going to throw out one more coach, and that is Kirby Smart. Now, would he make the move from Georgia to Alabama? Honestly speaking, I don't really think so. Okay, he's from South Georgia, grew up as a lifelong Georgia fan, played at Georgia. Most of the coaches on his staff are ex-Georgia players. And, he's coming off of having 2 national championships. They didn't make it into the playoffs this season, but his roster is just as strong as what Alabama's is. And I also think that Georgia is going to be just a little bit more laid back, in firing Kirby Smart if he does not produce as highly as what Nick Saban has over the past, 17 seasons. Okay, whoever goes into Alabama needs to know that that leash is going to be very short. That's a spoiled fan base, and they expect to win, and they expect to win right now. So don't really see much of a reason for him to do that. He's also been rumored to go on to the NFL. I don't really see that happening. To me, he's not much of an NFL coach, but it kind of would be interesting to see him leave from Georgia and see them maybe take a couple of steps back, but at the same time, they could get in an even better X's and O's coach, and then they could be even better than what they are right now. Because I'm going to tell you, Georgia's been leaving a whole lot of meat on the bone, so to speak. But that's it as far as the coaching, changes that I see potentially happening. Obviously, we'll have a whole lot more news coming out here shortly. Alabama's got to find somebody. I think that they need to find somebody pretty quickly because, again, these young prospects that, either have already chose Alabama in the class of 2024 or, are looking at them, for future classes or in the transfer portal, they've got to try to do something concrete in that program to retain those guys. Now, there are a couple of players that, it was kind of rumored that it was between Tennessee and Alabama, and they chose Alabama. Do those guys maybe flip their choice and come on back home to Tennessee? I think that the door is still open for them. I hope that we got some scholarships left. But those are the things that I'm looking out for the closest. And I will keep y'all up to date as some more things come across my desk. But thank y'all as always for tuning in. Really big news for us Vol fans. I think that, now we've got an even better chance to really be able to get a stronghold on the SEC. And also, man, our schedule looks a little bit lighter without Nick Saban on it next season. So things are really looking up for us. Let's close out on these transfer portal prospects. Let's go and see how many players we can purge from Alabama. And let's go win these titles, baby. Appreciate y'all. As always, please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. We'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks. Peace.